Should all acquaintance be forgot for old lang syne?
Okay, enough of that. All right, you guys. That song was actually also from the very first movie. During this, it was like during Christmas time, and it was, you know, showing all the sad moments or whatever of when everybody was alone. So, if you've seen the movie, you recognize that song. Anyways, it's been a little time since I read the last chapter. I was just talking to my friend Elizabeth, and we'll get into more of that a little bit later. But in the meantime, we are going to continue with tonight's reading, ladies and gentlemen. I am now on chapter 9. If you have not seen chapter 8, be sure to go back and check that out. That was basically talking about threesomes. It was like 7 different men talking about their experiences and their opinions and such with threesomes that they've had with women. So it was a very interesting chapter. Alright, so this next chapter is called What Has Two Wheels, Wears Seersucker, and Makes a Sucker of Me? A Bicycle Boy. Here we go, you guys. Oh, I forgot to add a little something. I thought something was missing a little bit on the show, and I hope it's not distracting at all, but I thought it'd add a nice little fun touch to it to have a little something playing in the background, a little jazz or something, so I thought I'd add that. Alright, here we go, you guys. A few weeks back, I had an encounter with this bicycle boy. It happened at a book party that was held in a great marble hall on a tree-lined street. While I was that's a big word, surreptitiously, it's surreptitiosly. Anyway, stuffing my face with smoked salmon. A writer friend, a guy, rushed up and said, "I've just been talking to the most interesting man." "Oh yeah? Where?" I asked, glancing around the room with suspicion. "He used to be an archaeologist, and now he writes science books." "Fascinating." "Say no more," I said. I had already spotted the man in question. He was dressed in, and I imagine was the city version of a safari suit, khaki trousers, a cream checked shirt, and a slightly shabby tweed jacket. His gray blonde hair was racked back from his forehead, exposing a handsome chipped profile. So I was motoring, as much as you can motor in strappy high-heeled sandals, across the room. He was in deep conversation with a middle-aged man, but I quickly took care of the situation. "You?" I said. "Someone just told me you were fascinating. I hope you won't disappoint me." I bore him off to an open window, and I plied him with cigarettes and cheap red wine. After 20 minutes, I left him to go meet some friends for dinner. The next morning, he called me while I was still in bed with a hangover. Let's call him Horace Eccles. He talked about romance. It was nice to lie in bed with my head throbbing and a handsome man cooling in my ear. We arranged to meet for dinner. The trouble began almost immediately. First he called to say he was going to be an hour early. Then he called back to say he wasn't. Then he called to say he was going to be an hour late. Then he called and said he was just around the corner. Then he really was 45 minutes late. And then he turned up on his bicycle. I didn't realize this at first. All I noticed was a more than normal dishevelment for a ride and a slight breathiness, which I attributed to the fact that he was in my presence. "Where do you want to have dinner?" he asked. "I've already arranged it," I said. "Elaine's." His face twisted. "But I thought we'd just have dinner at some neighborhood place around the corner." I gave him one of my looks and said, "I don't have dinner at neighborhood places around the corner." For a moment, it looked like it was going to be a standoff. Finally, he blurted out, "But I came on my bicycle, see?" I turned around and stared at the offending piece of machinery, which was tethered to a lamp's post. "I don't think so," I said. Mr. New Yorker and his 3-speed. This was not my first encounter with the Manhattan literacy romantic subspecies I've come to call the bicycle boys. A while back, I was at a dinner with one of the most famous bicycle boys, whom we'll just call Mr. New Yorker. Mr. New Yorker, an editor at the publication, looks like he's 35, even though he's quite a bit older, with floppy brown hair and a devastating smile. When he goes out, he usually has his pick of single women, and not just because these women want to get something published in the New Yorker. He's smooth and a little sloppy. He sits down next to you and talks to you about politics and asks you your opinion. He makes you feel smart. And then, before you know it, he's gone. Hey, where's Mr. New Yorker? Everyone was asking at 11 o'clock. He made a phone call. One woman said, and then he took off his bike. He was going to meet someone. The image of Mr. New Yorker stealing through the night in his tweedy jacket, pumping like mad on his 3-speed bike, with fenders to keep his pants from getting dirty, haunted me. I pictured him pulling up to an Upper East Side walk-up, or maybe a loft building in Soho, leaning against the buzzer and then panting slightly, wheeling his bike up the stairs. A door would open, and he and his inamorata would be giggling as they tried to figure out where to put the bike. Then they'd fall into a sweaty embrace, no doubt ending up on some futon on the floor. The Bicycle Boy actually has a long literacy social tradition in New York. The patron saints of bicycle boys are white-haired rider George Plimpton, whose bike used to hang upside down above his employees' heads at the Paris Review offices, and white-haired Newsday columnist Murray Kempton. They've been writing for years and are the inspiration of the next generation of bicycle boys, like the aforementioned Mr. New Yorker and scores of New York book, magazine, and newspaper editors and writers who insist on traversing Manhattan's physical and romantic landscape as solitary peddlers. Bicycle boys are a particular breed of New York bachelor. Smart, funny, romantic, lean, quite attractive, and are the stuff that grown-up coy dreams are made of. There's something incredibly charming about a tweedy guy on a bike, especially if he's wearing goofy glasses. Women tend to feel a mixture of passion and motherly affection, but there's a dark side. Most bicycle boys are not married and probably never will be, at least not until they give up their bikes. Why John F. Kennedy Jr. was not a bicycle boy. Riding a bike is not necessarily a power move, said Mr. Eccles. It's best done by power people like George Plimpton. Otherwise, you have to ride your bike around the corner and, oh my god, surreptitiously take your trousers out of your socks. Bicycle boys don't ride their bikes for sport, like those silly guys you see riding around and around the park. They ride partly for transportation and, more important, to preserve a literally boyhood. Think of Twilight at Oxford, riding over the cobblestones while a woman waits down by the Cherry River, wearing a flowy dress, clasping a Valium V's. That's how bicycle boys think of themselves as they pedal Manhattan, dodging cabbies and potholes. While John F. Kennedy Jr. was certainly New York's most famous and sought-after bike-riding bachelor, his rippled athleticism disqualifies him for bicycle boydom. Because a bicycle boy would rather bike through Midtown in a sheer-sucker suit than in shorts and a chest-hugging tee. And bicycle boys spurn those skin-tight bike pants that have cushy foam padding suit into the butt. Bicycle boys are not adverse to the chastising pain of a hard bike seat. It hurts the literature. I don't own any spandex pants, said Mr. New Yorker, who added that he wears long johns in the winter to keep warm. Which may be one reason bicycle boys, more than their athletic cousins, tend to get physically attacked. The other reason is that they ride at any hour. The later the better, more romantic, and any physical condition anywhere. Drunks roar out of their windows at night to send you into a tailspin, said Mr. Eccles, and worse. One Halloween, Mr. New Yorker was wearing a British Bobby's cap when he rode into a group of 12-year-olds who yanked him off his bike. I said, I can't fight you all at once. I'll fight one of you. They all stepped back, except for the biggest one. I suddenly realized I didn't want to fight him, either. The whole gang jumped on Mr. New Yorker and began pounding him, until some innocent bystanders started screaming and the gang ran away. I was lucky, said Mr. New Yorker. They didn't take my bike, but they did take some records I had in my basket. Note that Mr. New Yorker was carrying records, as in vinyl albums, not CDs. Another sign of a true bicycle boy. Mr. Eccles recalled a similar story. 2 days ago, I was riding through Central Park at 10 at night when I was surrounded by a wilding gang on rollerblades. They were almost children. They tried to capture me in a flank maneuver, but I was able to bicycle away even faster. But an even bigger danger is sex, as a reporter will call Chester found out. Chester doesn't ride his bike as much as he used to because a year ago he had a bad cycling accident after a romantic interlude. He was writing his story on Topless Dancers when he struck up a friendship with Lola. Maybe Lola fancied herself as a Marilyn Monroe to his Arthur Miller. Who knows? All Chester knows is that one evening she called him up and said she was lying around in bed at Trump Palace and could come over. He hopped on his bike and was there in 15 minutes. They went at it for 3 hours. Then she said he had to leave because she lived with someone and the guy was coming home any minute. Chester ran out of the building and jumped on his bike. But there was a problem. His legs were so shaky from having sex they started cramping up just as he was going down Marie Hill, and he crashed over the curb and slid across the pavement. It really hurt, he said. When your skin is scraped off like that, it's like a first-degree burn. Luckily, his nipple did eventually grow back. A big steel thing between my legs. Riding a bike in Manhattan is indeed a perilous sport. If these riders lived out west, maybe they'd carry guns, like something out of a Larry McMurtry or Tom McGav or Cormac McCarthy. But since they live in New York, the bicycle boys are more the Clark Kent type. Mild-mannered reporters by day who often have to answer to killer editrixes. They become menaces to society by night. And who can blame them? You ride through red lights, you ride against traffic, you can be a felon, said Chester. I feel like there's a big steel thing between my legs throbbing ahead of me, said one bicycle boy, who asked to be unnamed. I have my hand on my bike right now, said Kip, a literary agent, speaking on the phone from his office. There's a freedom in being on your bike in the city. You feel like you're floating above the mesas. I'm pretty fearless on my bike, and in ways I can't be in the rest of my life. I feel like I'm the best on my bike, the most in tune with myself and the city. Bicycle boys are particular about their bikes. They don't usually ride souped-up high-tech mountain bikes. No Shimano XT derailleurs or Elastomor suspension forks for them. More typical is Mr. New Yorker, who rides a polite 3-speed with a basket in front and fenders. The bike should radiate nostalgia. You have to have a basket for groceries, said Mr. New Yorker. Your computer and work stuff. My bike is definitely like my dog and my baby, said Kip. I kind of take care of it and preen it. But often when bicycle boys talk about their bikes, it's hard not to think they are talking about women. I love my bike, and you can get attached to a bike, said one BB. But the truth is that one bike is very much like another. I had one bike that I went completely over the top with, said Kip. It had an aluminum frame, and I had stripped it and polished it quite a bit, and then it got stolen. I was emotionally devastated. I couldn't get over it until I got a new bike and really made it beautiful. Like girlfriends, bikes are always getting stolen in New York. If you go into a bookstore for 10 minutes and you come out and your bike is gone, said Mr. Eccles. This, however, is not necessarily a problem, as Mr. New Yorker pointed out. The bike pays for itself in 3 months if you compare it to a subway fare, he said. 1 month if you take taxis. The bike can also be a useful prop when it comes to meeting women. It's a good way to start a conversation, said Thad, a writer. It's also something to fuss with to alleviate your self-consciousness. And apparently it's a good way to tell whether or not you're going to get laid. One time, a woman got mad at me when I proposed riding my bike to her house, said Thad. On the other hand, if a woman says, bring the bike inside, it's very sexy. Whether or not a woman lets you bring your bike into her house is an indication of how well adjusted she is, said Mr. Eccles. If she's anal retentive, she won't want the bike anywhere near your stuff. But sometimes a bike is just a bike, and women seem to know this. One is viewed as a suspicious character. You're too mobile and independent, said Mr. Eccles, and certainly a bit undignified in the end. There is something Peter Panish about it, said Kit. That's part of the reason I don't take it everywhere anymore. It implies a certain selfishness, agreed Mr. Eccles. You can't give anyone a lift, and there's a little too much freedom associated with the man who rides a bike. Mr. Eccles added that, being in his early 50s, there were about 10 reasons why he wasn't married. None of them particularly good ones. It can also imply a certain cheapness. One woman, an assistant editor at a glossy men's magazine, remembered a date she had with the bicycle boy she met at a book signing. After chatting her up, the bicycle boy made a date to meet her at a nice steakhouse on the Upper West Side. He showed up, late, on his bike. He was waiting outside, nervously smoking cigarettes. Then after they'd sat down and looked at the menu, he said, "Look, do you mind? I've just realized I'm really in the mood for pizza. You don't care, do you?" He stood up. "But don't we have to?" she said, glancing at the waiter. He grabbed her arm and hustled her out. "All of you who had a few sips of water. I didn't even touch mine. They can't charge you for that." They went back to the house and ate pizza, and then he made his move. They saw each other a few other times after that, but every time he wanted to come to her house at 10 at night and eat takeout food. She finally ditched him and went out with the banker. Really? Shit skipping? Alright, and then this is the crotch problem. Bicycle boys often make the mistake of trying to turn their girlfriends into bicycle girls. Joanna, a woman who grew up on a Fifth Avenue and now works as an interior designer, actually married a bicycle boy. We both rode bikes, she said, so at first it wasn't a problem. But I noticed something was kind of wrong when he gave me a bicycle seat for my birthday. Then for Christmas, he gave me a bike rack to put on the car. When we got divorced, he took the bike rack back and kept it for himself. Can you believe that? Boys on bikes? God, no, said Magna, the novelist. Can you imagine what a stinky crotch they have? No, thank you. I've been mowed down too many times by men on bikes. They're all kamikaze, selfish pricks. If they have sex the way they ride their bikes, thank you, but speed is not important. Women don't think riding a bike is sexy, said Thad. They think it's infantile. But at some point, you decide that you can't go through life giving women a false impression of who you are. There you go, you guys. That was chapter 10, or 9, chapter 9, sorry. That was chapter 9, you guys, and we're at 18 minutes, OMG. Alright, so I'm going to do one more chapter tonight, just to kind of catch up the other days that I haven't read, but it might not be on until about a few hours later, because in the meantime, I'm going to go get me some food while this video is uploading, because I am starving. So, ladies and gentlemen, can stay tuned for tonight, because I will be reading one more chapter, which is going to be chapter 10. So be sure to comment, go back on the videos if you have not checked out the other chapters, you guys. Be sure to comment and let me know what you think about the show so far. Angie actually gave me some really good ideas, but I don't want to explain those ideas here because I want to just put it into the show and see how much fun we can have with that. Alright, you guys, so stay tuned for the continuation of the Sex and the City series. I'll be reading one more chapter tonight, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Alright, holla back, you guys. Holla back.